Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to the Roundup. We are a Cowboy State Daily podcast, and we focus on really interesting people here in the Cowboy State. And we have gotten so many comments and so much feedback from one particular story that reporter Renee Jean did about a medieval house that was built outside of Cheyenne. And we knew that we wanted to talk to the gentleman who built this house, who brought over the design for this house. And so we decided that this was going to be one of our Roundup episodes. And I'm so pleased to introduce everybody to Meadowcroft. Cooning is here to share with us not just the story of the house, but the house itself. This is the magic of Zoom, and this is the magic of all of these technology that we have, is that we can actually take a tour through this house. We get to meet his lovely wife, Christine, and talk about the daunting task of bringing to life an almost extinct style of building. And so I'm going to start out by saying, hello, Cooning Meadowcroft. Welcome to the Roundup. We're so glad you're here with us today.
Thank you.
Cooning, let's just really quickly start off with how you got to Wyoming, because you were born, you're an Englishman. What brought you to Wyoming in the first place?
Well, it's kind of odd, really. I was in New England in the mid 80s, and I was invited over by an aunt who lived in Salem, Massachusetts. And I was pretty enthralled with the enthusiasm of Americans who enjoy their history, especially in New England. And of course, I was very much interested in history too. So I got involved very quickly in restoring and restoration of historical houses, buildings in Salem, Massachusetts, including their fences, which are very ornate. Um, I started off in furniture making, so I was very much interested in this kind of woodwork, and my ancestry uh, is very much in that way too. My grandpa, my great grandfather, and my great great grandfather. In fact, I have all their tools, worn down as they may be. And so back in the mid 80s, something caught my eye because property in England is just so outrageously expensive and highly restrictive to what you can do. That was then, let alone now. And so I saw a tiny little article of land for sale in Wyoming. And yes, it might be titled under large acreage, but for $50 an acre was just insane. But of course, that was back in the 80s. And I thought nothing more of it. And so I went back to England and spent 10 years continuing where I left off in Salem, which is to get out of furniture making so much and go into restoring of buildings, houses, and whether it be a door, an addition, or some fancy fence work. And then from there, things got really bad in England regarding multiple situations, whether it be my marriage, the political situation in England, but mostly just the taxation and the restriction of what you can and cannot do over there. And so I said if I ever came back to the US, I would choose the state. And for multiple reasons, I chose Wyoming. But something stuck out in my mind about that little ad back in the 80s, and it was just mind blowing. So, of course, I did all my research online, checking out the coasts, which were out of the window for me cost wise. I didn't want to live in the South because I had chronic health problems, which I didn't know at the time what they were about. But I knew it had to do with pollution. Being in and out of London, it's very, very polluted. In fact, the police officers in Parliament Square can only spend 2 hours a day because of the fumes in the traffic.
I had
And
no
so,
idea. That's so interesting. Wow.
yeah, it's very, very, very bad to be there. And I was there for many hours, at least on Wednesdays, doing a political stance. But in any case, when I decided to come back to the US, I wanted somewhere where I could afford and have the freedom to do what I want. And I had in mind at that time in 1999 and 2000 an idea of building a home made out of crooks. And I was toying with the idea of a mead hall as opposed to a cottage. A mead hall is a much larger project to take on because of the series of crooks. If you make a cottage, it's just not as big of a problem because when you have two crooks facing each other, a pair of crooks on either side, it wouldn't even matter if the building tapered wider at one end than the other. But as soon as you introduce a third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, then you start weaving in and out. It becomes very, very difficult to start to get your lines all straight in the roof and the walls and so on.
Kooning,
So
could we pause for just a moment for people who haven't read the article? Could you explain the whole idea of a crook and where that comes from and what exactly it is? The one tree idea.
So it's a bit like a boat too. Boats are done in the same fashion, that they will take an entire tree and utilize even the root and the leaning of the tree towards the outside of the forest into the light. So this wouldn't be a commercial tree in the center of the forest growing straight up and utilizing the quality timber in that way. And so a lot of peasants' cottages were made out of these crooks because it was wood, not necessarily very popular with the king's timbers, who were very precious for what they needed them for in shipbuilding. Although, like I say, they did use them in the main timber in the center of the boat, but it really wasn't pertaining to such large scales of ships that they were building. It just has an interesting parallel that they're looking for that bent shape. So building a crook cottage was very inexpensive. They would use the branches. They would use, like I say, the tree that leaned out to the light that was only fit for firewood, had no quality of number one timber and straight timber and so on. So when they would make these cottages, you could literally pick them up from the 4 points of the base of each crook blade and move the building, walls, roof, and all. So everything sat upon these crooks, the walls and the roof. So to find these timbers, like I say, you would look on the perimeter of the forest where the tree would curve towards the light. And that is the basis of a crook. It is a crook only when it goes from the apex, the ridge, all the way to the floor of the building. It's not really a crook if you lay a truss on top of a crook. Otherwise, every truss in the world would be labeled as a crook. It is an independent and everything sitting upon it. So you can't create frames and stick them together and call it a crook. A crook is a piece of timber that goes from the apex all the way to the foundation uninterrupted, one timber. And these are natural crooks. You can make man-made ones. They have been made in not so distant past in recent times, but to find natural crook is a real difficulty because as in the shipbuilding going on right now is Sutton Hoo, they've been delayed, I think, by 18 months because the timbers that they picked for the same reason I did for the curvage turned out to be wrong. I think they got some pith in it and it disrupted the structure of the timber. And so they've had to go back into the forest and start all over again because that's where you start with the boat is the keel board, I'm not a shipbuilder, is the main timber that runs from stern to bow. Yeah. And so it's a real problem in finding the right timber for that structure. And then, like I said, when you add multiple ones, now you're starting to weave in and out along the wall and along the roof line. So it poses a real difficult problem. In my case, is the 3 foot variation. 3 foot is good size of variation in the roof. And I took probably 98% of it out. It still has a slight roll in it, but it's as good as it's going to get. And
So
so I
where
thought,
did you find the wood that you used for your house? Because that's like you say, it's not something you find just anywhere. Where did you find the trees that you decided to use for your Wyoming mead hall?
so there was somebody in town who was a teacher in woodwork in, I think East High, and he had a little side business called Rattlesnake Woods. I think he sold it subsequently in recent years, but I contacted him because I wanted to know his opinion about where is the nearest place to get quality commercial oak. Because I knew I was looking for something, especially for the main crook in the hall, where it has no structure underneath it. It's not a gable end. It doesn't have any flooring to it. It's freestanding on its own. And so that crook definitely had to be as close as I could to a 3 foot in diameter at the base, because once you cut it in half, it's now only half the thickness. So I'm looking for something about 3 foot, but it also has to be curved, leaning to the light. And so he said, when I contacted him, he got talking. He said he had a cousin back in southern Illinois near Anna, near the border of Kentucky, and he said he had a farm and a mill, and he would be willing to accommodate such things because my choices were West Coast, which is even further away, and the nearest I knew would be like would be back in New England. That's the only knowledge I had. So since he had that connection, I took him up on it. And lo and behold, when I got out there, he certainly had some trees that I was interested in, but nothing that his mill could handle in the sawn timber, because I needed 2 semi-loads of sawn oak and 2 semi-loads of natural crook timbers. And he wasn't able, but whilst I was in that location, I was able to look up and research local mills. For instance, the tie beams between the crook blades, especially where I floored some of the bays for apartments for us to live in. They had to be over 30 foot long. And in fact, the large commercial mill that I found, they said if I wanted anything bigger, because I was kind of hinting at something bigger, and he said 30 is his maximum length that he could handle. And then as for the crooks, I was able to find them on this chap's cousin's farm. He had a large piece of the Shoshone forest that spilled over into his farmland. So that's where I started. And looking through the forest, apart from chiggers and ticks, I found the crooks that I was looking for. Not all perfect, but they worked. And so it was a bit of a challenge because this was a one-shot deal. Unlike Sutton Hoo shipbuilding that they're trying to recreate right now as we speak, I didn't have the funds to go back there and rebuy more timber. And I was very, very fortunate that the 9 crooks that I assembled, it worked out, but they couldn't have gone anywhere else but where they went. For instance, the one crook that I focused on, that was the largest one, could have only gone in the center of the hall. And then you have 3 gable ends, which have to be weathered. So those couldn't have any carpenter ant nests in them, no internal rot. And luckily, I was able to pick and find 3 of them. And so that's 4 of them. And then the rest, of course, they could be put wherever they need to be for their look and for their strength. For instance, the real Gothic shaped one, I kept that for the balcony, which you'll see in a moment when I scan and maybe some video up and show you the
Yeah,
structure.
actually, I was thinking that this might be a good time to do that. I know before we got started, we were thinking that we'd get your wife involved here at this point, but I think that we'd rather do the tour right now. So could you
Okay.
pick your phone up here and turn the camera around and take us on a tour so we can see what it is you're talking about with the crooks? Because I think this is just really a great opportunity for us to look and see where it is and what it is that we've been talking about with these crooks. All right. And
All
we're in
right.
your study right now, correct?
Yeah, this is where I do a lot of my drawings and studying of the subject, although it didn't start there. So we're leaving the study and we're going from the entrance hall here. I call this staircase the $1 million staircase because it was very complicated. I'm trying to get out of the light. Hold on. I call it the $1 million staircase because I had 7 points to miss. I already put the ceiling up. Sometimes I did things back to front because I'm a one-man show here, so I tried to use the existing structure to help me support things. Like I put the walls up first, so I had some extra anchoring for when I lifted the crooks in place. So not only I had a foundation to pick the crooks up into the building, but I had to get over a 9-foot wall, which was necessary. So I had something to anchor to. So a lot of these images that you will see, I don't know if the lighting's that good, but this is the eagle off the Sutton Hoo shield.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so we're leaving the staircase now. And we're
Look
going
at
into
this
the hall.
place.
I'm trying to keep away from the light. I'll do my best. The lighting isn't always the best near photography and video. So it's 3-story. Obviously, the second and third story is in the roof. But there's actually an area above the third floor, which I stand without touching the ceiling. So it's pretty cool.
So it's worth calling it the 3 stories. And so these big timbers are the crooks that you're talking about, these trees that were cut in half that make
Yes.
the bones of
Right.
this house.
So I'm going to go upstairs to the first floor because I think it might be better. This one you're looking at right now, this one I liked because it had such a Gothic shape to it, but it was meant to go on the west gable end, but I couldn't. Like I was saying before, they all went where they could only go. And the reason I couldn't use it in the gable end, because it wouldn't be very easily weathered. And I'm showing you the tasks that were at hand. So when I split it, it had this enormous hole in it from where the carpenter ants were eating it while it was alive and living. So that would have been very difficult to keep from decaying because of the problem of its structure being interfered with infestation with a carpenter ant. But it worked very well inside here. Now we're looking at the main hall, and the crooks here. This one here could have only gone here. It was the largest one I had. And it was actually, ironically, in the middle of the forest, but it was still split. But what happened, it was a perfectly large, almost 3 feet. I mean, it was 36 inches or 33. And I took it because although it was only split 2/3 of the way up, the last length of it was the fork in the tree. And they were perfectly forked. Not one was leaning one way or the other. So they have to meet up at the apex. And when you're laying these crooks out, you want them as flat as possible because otherwise your gable ends are going to be all over the place. And you just need them as true as possible. And it's done with the naked eye. You can.
And these are the 30-foot beams that tied everything together that you were talking about, correct?
Yes. Well, this one in particular arrived 47 foot long. I cut it down. So I kept them long just in case, because you can measure the length of the crook, but because of its curvature, it changes. That's why I was saying the tape measure and spirit level virtually get thrown away because everything is done by eye, a lot of it anyway. And so, yeah, so they could have only gone like this one here we're looking at. It's a real decrepit one, but it has a very cool shape to it because it winds back and forth. But it could have only gone here because it wasn't as thick and heavy duty as I would like. But you see how it goes from the front door, the door sill, and it just follows uninterrupted. I mean, there is half lap joint, but behind that crossbeam, it continues, and it continues all the way up, arguably 4 stories, because up there on that last tie beam, I stand clear of the beams. But it's
How
only four.
tall? How tall from the apex of the roof all the way to the ground? How tall is that?
Um, it's 33 feet from the floor to the apex on the inside. On the outside, it would be close to 34 feet, but that's not including the foundation. I think Lee Barn Hall talks about other measurements, but I think they're referring to the foundation because the foundation rises up from the floor by about 2 or 3 feet. And so when they talk in reference to the building overall, they're referring to, the whole stature of the building. For instance, the outside of the building, when I had to raise these crooks with a 1947 cable crane, no hydraulics,
Oh my
I
word.
had to not only deal with a 33-foot frame, but I also had to get it over a 5-foot foundation and a 9-foot wall. So the way I achieved that is I had the truck connected to one heel of the frame, and I tensioned it so it would pull. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. It would pull the frame and tilt it so one leg would be further up in elevation than the other, and then I would swing the crane over so it would get inside the. I'm going up to the third floor, so it would go up and over the 9-foot wall plus foundation. And then once I got one leg in, I would twist it kitty cornered and drop in the other end of the frame and then twist it into place, swing it into place. This is the third floor.
All these
Probably
rooms
moving
are
too
just
fast now.
charming. They're just amazing. You come around the corner and there's something new and there's something new. Did you have all this in
So
mind
another
already before you even began it? Did you have the floor
no,
plan
this is
laid
this
out?
is I claim no, I claim this is it's an experimental home because the technology has been lost because of the unworldly, unruly shape of the timbers. And so it becomes very difficult on this scale, that is, to align everything. To the side of the crook, there's a thing called a principal rafter. That's that timber that's nearer to the ceiling. So you have your common rafters behind the plaster, and then you have your principal rafter, which kicks out these horizontal pieces here, and it kicks them out so the roof isn't following exactly the line of the crook, but everything is still sitting upon the crook. So if I show you that crook there on the same latitude of that tie beam right there, the ceiling is about 18 inches from the crook. This one here, I can show in the corner here. Maybe I can show it around. It's actually touching the ceiling. So there's 18 inches difference there that those principal rafters take out. And then we look at this one, there's a desk in the way, but it's about 3 feet at one point away from the ceiling.
And that's
Same
just the
elevation
organic nature of the fact that they're natural
of the crook.
trees, right?
Yeah, they're not,
Just the change in the shape of the natural trees.
yeah, how they grew. Like looking down there, that's a better view. Um, right there above the front door. There's about
Right.
there's a 3-foot variation there above the door. If I've got that right for you, yeah. And then when you look, I can't show you them all because they have structures in front of them. But if you look at this one down here, you can see it's a lot closer to the ceiling at the same level.
Yes.
So they
Yes.
vary wildly. And so you're not just dealing with 2 crooks, you're not dealing with 3, but you're dealing with 6 in a row. And it's a real challenge. And that's why you can't really do it without that principal rafter. See where it goes? It goes from the wall the wall plate, the top of the wall, and it goes. I think they're from memory, a long time ago. I think from memory, I think they're closer to 20 feet long. So, and then
Sure.
they joint at whatever point in the crook they joint in with a tenon, a long tenon, and then pegged. This building has no in the main frame. It has no nails.
No
They're um,
kidding.
they're just mortise and tenons and pegs. And so
And you did that
when
obviously because you wanted to stay true to the ancient
the main
architecture and
frame,
the ancient way of doing this.
right? The main thing was the main frame. I wanted to keep that intact to how it was. For instance, this crook down here, that little timber that goes from the crook to the wall is called a
Yes.
spur, and it
Yes.
has a it's not a it's a half lap notched out joint, so it kind of scarfs into the side, but it has like a V cut out of it, so it hooks onto the crook, not just pegged, so that the walls can't blow out or push in. And then the other end is what they call a half lap secret dovetail. So all these tie beams that you're looking down on above the stained glass, a secret half lap dovetail. So as the beam comes down on the wall, it locks into place with the shoulder and the dovetail, so the wall can't go in and can't come out. And that was a challenge because my neighbors were bewildered to how the structure stayed up because it was a skeleton for so long. And what I did is I put 6-foot anchors. They use them for tying down trailer homes and big
Sure.
structures.
Yep.
And these were about 6 foot long, and I just drove them into the ground, coiled them into the ground, and then you use 1-inch steel ropes that went up to the A-frame of the structure and tied them off, bolted them in place, one on either gable end. So it went right through the main hall and then off to the garage. So all three sides were anchored down so they couldn't move. But then once I got all the modern materials on, because I wouldn't live long enough if I did what they call wattle and daub, which is in the walls. That's a process of, I'm going to go downstairs. That's a process where you use hazel sticks and you drill a series of holes, and you put the sticks in, and then you weave split hazel sticks, weave them back and forth like a basket, and then you fill it with a concoction of mud and and uh, and straw and so on. And then for the roof, they would use boards. And if they didn't use boards, they would just go straight into thatching. And so you could literally see the thatch up through the rafters.
And I
And
think that's what you expect with a house like this. You expect a thatched roof just because of the style of architecture and the era that this style of architecture came
I
from.
would love
I
to be
want
able to put one on, but it
I
would
I
cost a fortune.
well, yeah, and Wyoming's winds I don't think would probably lend too much to that. I want to take just a moment and have you introduce us to the two young ladies that I see. There was one that was kind of leading your way there, and then we've got Christine as well. Tell us about who else lives in your house with you, with this amazing house.
Well, I have three daughters, Ethel, Hazel, and Edith, and my wife, Christine.
All right, and there's Christine. Hello, Christine.
How are you?
I'm so glad to meet you. I'm so glad to meet Kooning and to meet your daughters here. This is a family. Hi there. Oh, who do we have?
They do have homeschool friends, many of them, where they go to extra extracurricular. Extracurricular activities. Yeah,
Extracurriculars? Yes.
yeah. So they have a lot of friends that are homeschoolers and in the main school, and so yeah, they're pretty happy where they live. So we say, do you want to say anything, girls?
Well, it's very nice to meet all of you. I'd like to ask your mom a couple of questions. Christine, my understanding is that you joined the process partway through. So
Yeah,
this was well underway when you and Kooning first met and first started dating and came together. What did you think when you first saw this skeleton that was being built, this amazing historical project? What was your first thought?
I thought it was pretty neat. It was nice to meet somebody who was motivated.
Motivated for sure, yes. And so tell me, what's the most interesting part of all of this? Is it raising the girls in this piece of history come to life? Or is there still so much to do? What's your part in this creative process, Christine?
I'm just I just kind of am here to help and make people.
And that's not true. When we laid the floor, because there was no floor, there was only subflooring. When we laid the the Great Hall floorboards and right through the first floor, um, she complained a lot about getting splinters in her butt
Oh yes.
because
Oh my.
her job was to fill the screw holes with wood filler,
Yes.
and there was thousands of them.
Yes. It's many days of scooting around on a bare wood floor when I had a lot of splinters in my butt.
But she's
And
also a lot of the internal framework and plasterboard and stuff like that. She's helped with a lot. It's I was dreading to do the cosmetic work. It's not my favorite, and so yeah, doing all the sheetrock and doing the plastering and painting. And she was very helpful in helping me in all the laboring.
so
Uh,
let's just kind of shift back then towards the historical part of this house and the what you're honoring with this house, the history and the era that you're honoring with this house. Tell us about what you're trying to do with all of the decor, with the stained glass, with the flags. What era of history are you honoring here?
I'll switch it around so it's more appropriate for what I'm trying to discuss. So I dedicated to Alfred, Alfred the Great. Coincidentally, I don't know if you can see that if the sun is blocking him out, but
Yep, we see him up there.
there's a mural up there of Alfred the Great. And Alfred was, by many, including myself, considered the first king of England. Some say his grandson was, but that would be a bit like saying George Washington wasn't the first president of the United States because he didn't have the Louisiana Purchase or any of the other states. So Alfred uh, pushed the Vikings out from the south and southeast of England and created the first state of England. He was the first king to start referring not so much as the King of Wessex, but the English and King of the English. And so those references, in conjunction with him making a national navy, national army, and national sea defense, he truly was the first king of England. He may have not had the whole of it by pushing the Vikings out throughout the north of England, but he certainly had a great deal to do with the start of England. And he was first the King of Wessex, but his better title. See, I don't think you can see any of this writing.
Yeah, we
It's
can't
too
see the
bad.
writing, but what does it say?
Um, well, it wasn't something he wrote so much. He copied it, I think, from uh, I forget who it was, a pope or something. But it's only a portion of what was written. I have it on the website, but it basically says, "Then I gathered for myself staves and props and bars and handles for all the tools that I knew how to use, and the crossbars and the beams for all the structures which I knew how to build, the fairest pieces of timber, as many as I could carry. In each tree I saw something that I required at home. He who advised me to whom the wood was pleasing may bring it past that I shall dwell at greater ease, both in this transitional habitation by this road while I am in this world and also in the eternal home which he has promised us, King Alfred. So those words are pertaining to structure clearly, but he was no, construction worker by any means. They're metaphors for creating a country and building it, like George Washington and all of the forefathers of the United States. And so it's very important that people realize this mammoth task. Just like the New Englanders pushed out the crown so that they could have greater control over their destiny, so did the English push out the Vikings, brought about by Alfred's men.
What an amazing piece of living history here, and a fantastic honor to your home country, and yet to this period of time that so many of us have almost forgotten about. So, what a fit! This has been an amazing undertaking. You're located outside of Cheyenne. Do you do you mind if people drive by, or is this something that you rather not have, your neighbors would rather not have a whole lot of people driving by and seeing what you've got there?
No, not at all. In fact, the website invites people. I built it so it could be a celebration of Alfred's achievement, but also it's a preservation of an era of England that I'm very proud of, but is very historical. This is the golden age of pre-Norman period. So, Alfred the Great was a little earlier than I can prove that crooks were around, but they certainly were around in the 11th century. So it pertains only to England, these crooks. And so I found it very fitting to put together Alfred and the crooks. And I want people to enjoy it as well. So yeah, people are invited to come by anytime, especially, I've had people knock on the door and they're not invited, and I welcome them in, both when I was in the middle of building it and after its most finished work. I mean, I'm still working on it now, but I've had people recently stop by and want to view, and it is usually by course of friends and people I know and get to know. But yeah, my phone number is on the website if they care to look for it. And so, yeah, the people are encouraged to come and visit it and enjoy it. That's what it's about.
Tuning, this has been a fantastic opportunity for us to take a look at what you've built here. We're so grateful that you spent a little bit of time with us here on the Roundup. How much do you have left, do you think? What's your timeline to completely finish the interior walls and all those other things?
Well, I have a couple of pieces outside I've left to do on the siding weatherization between the timbers. I got a couple of pieces I missed before my heart surgery. I was trying to get all that done so my wife wouldn't have such a nightmare if things went terribly awry. But as it is, it was a success, and I've still got a couple of panels to do outside to restore, because the first wave of infill between the timbers on the outside didn't work out. Like I say, it's very much an experimental deed, because they're called Tudor just because they're black and white. But the Tudors did not create that. When they fetched off all the clapboards, they saw the frame and they infilled between, like herringbone brick style, stucco, and so on. But it creates an enormous problem because of weatherization, which is one of the reasons why I was going to step outside briefly, if I could, if we got time.
Yes, yes.
It also has the murals. So, a camera around. We'll only briefly do this. Here we go. So here's the crook from the outside. Dragon on the end there. Goes all the way to the top where the mural
Wow.
is. So here is the problem, is where the
whether you have the stucco overlapping or you have brick infill, it's very difficult to get this weatherization. So I solved it. I had to rip it all out again and redo it. I use liquid nail screws and nails, and I put 2x4s behind here, and they're liquid nailed in with nails. And then this is instead of a 1/2 inch, this is a 3/4 inch moisture resistant OSB. And then for the surface, so it has the texture and look of stucco, I used a sand-based paint. They use it on decking, but there's 4 coats, and I use 20 times concentration, meaning it's 20 times thicker. So it's really like putting on mud.
Almost a
but
plaster,
it works really well.
sure.
See, this is 2 years old, and there's not even a crack. There's not even a crack. And so I've successfully done it, solved the problem. It's a horrendous problem. Here's the other mural. It's a drag off a Sutton Hoo shield. The other feature that I've done, which I don't know if I can see here, but they inherently rot out in the mortise joint in the foundation down here. So I drill a little hole angled up to keep the joint dry and aired. These little details, I hope, will ensure a much longer longevity on the timbers, especially being in Wyoming where it's dry. So I hope this building will have a lot of people enjoying it for many time to come.
Well, we are sure grateful that you took us on a tour of your amazing home, which is called Anglecynn Hall. Is that correct?
Yes.
Anglecynn Hall. And I'm going to make sure that we link to your website so that people can take a look at your processes and the things, the story of this really amazing home. And we're just grateful, Cyning and Christine, that you were able to let us in on this window of your life and this piece of history that you've brought to life in Wyoming. Thank you for bringing this to Wyoming. Folks, these are the kind of people that we have in Wyoming, and this is why we like to feature people like this on the Roundup. This has been just a real joy today. Thank you both. Thank you, folks, for tuning into the Roundup, and we hope that if you have interesting people that you think we need to talk to here on the Roundup, that we can do things like this with, we'd sure love to do that. So, Christine and Cyning, thank you very much. Roundup viewers, thank you very much. You can find us in the future or on this or all of our wonderful past episodes on both the Cowboy State Daily website, on any of the podcast apps that are out there, or on YouTube. Feel free to look us up and make sure that you look up the Meadowcroft home because it is something to see. Thank you both. Thank you all. Have a wonderful week.